In the early 1840s, the Lord commanded Joseph Smith to begin the practice of plural marriage among the saints that was continued for the next 50 years. When they moved to the Utah Territory, Brigham Young held a special conference session in August 1852 where Section 132 was read publicly. Orson Pratt gave a defense of plural marriage, and missionaries were sent to preach the practice all over the world. The saints believed it was ordained by God, and worked and prayed to overcome the challenges of human nature, selfishness, and jealousy to live this higher law. Plural marriage was very unpopular in the United States and throughout many parts of the world, and in 1882, the U.S. Congress passed the Edmunds Act that made unlawful cohabitation, or a man living with more than one wife, punishable by 6 months of imprisonment and a $300 fine. Then in 1887, it passed the Edmunds-Tucker Act to punish the church itself, not just its members, by dissolving the corporation of the church and confiscating all property worth more than $50,000. When the Civil War ended, the law was enforced, and in 1874, the first presidency encouraged George Reynolds to be convicted to test the law's constitutionality. The Supreme Court upheld it in 1879 and ruled that a person may believe in, but not practice, plural marriage. Many saints acted in civil disobedience and chose to obey God and practice plural marriage rather than give in to what they considered a bad law. Congress then passed tougher laws against the saints, which were upheld by the Supreme Court and enforced by federal marshals. Many families were separated to avoid prosecution, and men went into hiding and moved from house to house, staying with friends and relatives. Others escaped to out-of-the-way places to continue the practice in Arizona, Mexico, and Canada. President Wilford Woodruff knew he had to take action for the church's temporal salvation from the anti-polygamy laws Congress had passed that would destroy the saints. In May 1890, the Lord showed him in a vision that if they did not stop the practice, all temples would be confiscated by the U.S. government, they would also lose all church property valued over $50,000, and foreign saints would not be allowed to gather to Zion. He sought the Lord's guidance about continuing the practice, and on September 25, 1890, after much prayer, he received a revelation to issue a proclamation known as the Manifesto. It was sustained by his counselors and the Quorum of the 12, and became Official Declaration 1, announcing the revelation and explaining the change in doctrine. Inasmuch as laws have been enacted by Congress forbidding plural marriages, which have been pronounced constitutional by the court of last resort, I declare my intention to submit to those laws and use my influence with the church members over which I preside to have them do likewise. He told the government, "We are not teaching polygamy or plural marriage, nor permitting any person to enter into its practice." The manifesto was presented to the church at the October 1890 conference for a sustaining vote, and it became authoritative and binding. While most supported it, others were upset by the announcement and resented the U.S. government's laws. Church leaders had different opinions how to implement the manifesto and stop the practice of the principle of plural marriage. One challenge was that it only affected future marriages and not those sealed before. And President Woodruff said, "I did not, could not, and would not promise that you would desert your wives and children. This you cannot do in honor." Ending plural marriage was almost as much of a trial for the saints as starting it. They had faithfully defended and accepted the principle as a revelation from God for almost 50 years. The manifesto officially stopped the practice of creating new plural marriages where it was illegal, while a few were performed in countries like Canada and Mexico where it was legal. Some saints who had entered into plural marriage began to live with only one wife, while others escaped to countries where it was legal or hid in remote areas. In 1904, President Joseph F. Smith presented the Second Manifesto, declaring that the church no longer sanctioned marriages that violated the laws of the land, and anyone who entered into plural marriage would be excommunicated. By 1908, the manifesto was included in the Doctrine and Covenants as Official Declaration 1. The saints sacrificed much to live this higher law that was an Abrahamic test for many to show their willingness to obey the Lord in all things. The Spirit comforted them as they learned to accept plural marriage in the 1840s and then let it go 50 years later. We need to remember that this practice began with a revelation from the Lord to his prophet Joseph Smith and ended with another revelation to his prophet Wilford Woodruff. At the time of the Restoration, there was much controversy in the United States about racial prejudices that led to the Civil War in 1861. Early saints also had opinions and prejudices that were not always in line with the Lord's revelations. He taught that everyone should be free to act according to the moral agency given to them, to be accountable for their own sins in the day of judgment. And he denieth none that come unto him, black and white, bond and free, male and female. All are alike to God and beloved children. With the prophet's knowledge and consent, a few black men in the 1830s and 1840s received the priesthood, served missions, and served faithfully in the church. The first presidency declared in 1840 that persons of all languages, of every tongue, and of every color shall with us worship the Lord of hosts in his holy temple. But by 1849, black men were no longer being ordained to the priesthood. As an apostle in 1963, Spencer W. Kimball did not understand if this restriction was doctrine or policy, and said, "I wish the Lord had given us a little more clarity in this matter, and I know he could change this policy." At the time, he did not know how the Lord would eventually use him to change the policy. The First Presidency and the Quorum of the 12 wondered about the restrictions on who could receive the priesthood, and their commission from the Lord to take the gospel to all of God's children throughout the world. By 1978, thousands of West Africans had accepted the gospel and waited with great faith for baptism. Black Latter-day Saints all over the world also hoped and prayed for the long-promised day when temple blessings would be available to their families. President Kimball knew of his commission to take the blessings of the gospel to them and wanted to know how he could accomplish it. He followed the pattern for revelation and studied the policy's history. He assigned some apostles to study the scriptures and to write an analysis of the policy. They did not find any scriptural reasons it could not be changed, and there were many council meetings to discuss the issue from all sides. On March 9, 1978, the First Presidency and Quorum of the 12 unanimously voted that a policy change would have to come by revelation to the prophet. President Kimball also urged each of them to fast and pray to learn the Lord's will for themselves. He spent many hours praying and meditating in the temple, and 2 weeks later he told his counselors that he felt impressed to lift the restriction. They sustained him and wanted to discuss it with the apostles before making a final decision. President Kimball pled with the Lord to reveal his word to them and said, "After everybody had gone out of the temple, I knelt and prayed with such fervency. I knew that something was before us that was extremely important to many of God's children, and that we could receive the Lord's revelation only by being worthy and ready to accept them and put them into place." After many more council meetings, the First Presidency and the Quorum of the 12 planned to come to their next meeting on June 1st, fasting and praying to learn the Lord's will. The prophet canceled lunch and suggested that they continue fasting. He told them about his revelations and thoughts of lifting the restriction on priesthood and asked for their views. They were all in favor of ending it, and he humbly asked, "Do you mind if I lead you in prayer?" They united their faith around the temple altar, and President Kimball prayed that they would be cleansed and made free from sin, so that we might receive the Lord's word. He asked for the Lord to manifest to them that they had arrived at the right decision to do his will, and they were answered so clearly that there was no doubt about it. A week later, in the temple, the First Presidency announced the revelation to the general authorities that all worthy men of any race should be ordained to the priesthood, and all worthy members could now receive every temple ordinance. They voted to sustain the prophet, and he told President Eldon Tanner to go tell the world. He released a statement to the press that contained an official declaration too, and the First Presidency wrote, "We declare with soberness that the Lord has now made known his will for the blessing of all his children throughout the earth, who will hearken to the voice of his authorized servants. They had pleaded long and earnestly for this day, when the Lord revealed that every faithful and worthy man in the church may receive the holy priesthood, have power to exercise its divine authority, and enjoy all the blessings of the temple with his family. And these are official declarations 1 and 2 in the Doctrine and Covenants. Look for hidden objects throughout this video that are part of church history or something that would have been common to that time, and read each object's description to learn about life in the 1800s. You can also look for these other images hidden throughout the video. You can download a coloring page and activity puzzles for each section on Etsy at Ponderfun. Visit our Facebook page or ponderfun.com to find more fun things to do, and you can listen to these as a podcast. Please like and share these videos with anyone you think might enjoy them, and I'll keep making new ones. Thanks again for watching, and find some time this week to ponder.